Can brainwashing turn someone into a criminal? How deep does brainwashing bury into someone's psyche? How long can brainwashing impact someone? I think the Patty Hearst case, a woman who was abducted, subject to abuse, and then became an armed urban guerrilla working with her abductors, might give us some answers. Or maybe it'll just add more to the debate. But let's find out.
I couldn't even think thoughts for myself anymore because I had been so programmed that, the FBI was looking for the SLA. I shouldn't even try to think about rescue because they would call in psychics to find me.
Patricia Campbell Hearst was born in San Francisco, California in 1954. She is the third of 5 daughters, and she is the granddaughter, and thus heiress, of the American publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst. William Hearst created the largest newspaper, magazine, newsreel, and film business in the world. The family had immense political influence and was known to be against organized labor, gold mine workers' interests, and communism since before World War II. At the time she was abducted, Patty was attending Berkeley and studying art history while living in an apartment with her then fiancé, Stephen Weed, who also attended Berkeley. Her and Stephen had met while she was in high school, around 15 or 16 years old, and he was her art teacher and in his mid-20s. To this day, Stephen maintains that Patty pursued him, because that's what 15-year-old girls do to men in their mid-20s, right? And there's no way he could resist her pursuit. Anyway, they were in college in the 1970s, which was a very tumultuous time in America, and militant groups started cropping up, and radicalization, largely on the far left, was pervasive, and Berkeley was the rallying point for these kinds of revolutionaries. So Patty and Stephen were in the thick of it, to be honest. One night on February 4th in 1954, Patty was at home with Stephen in their apartment watching TV on the couch when they heard a knock on the door. They got up to answer the door and were greeted by an upset woman asking to use their phone. She claimed she'd crashed her car and that she needed help. This obviously brought the couple's guard down, and in that moment, 2 men barged in. One attacked Stephen, shoving him down and beating him repeatedly, while the other grabbed Patty, blindfolded her, threw her over his shoulder, ran to the group's car, and shoved Patty in the trunk. This actually and obviously caused a huge commotion, and neighbors started stepping outside wondering what the heck was going on. To stop any pursuit, one of the kidnappers grabbed his gun and fired off numerous rounds into the air. They then drove off to a safe house somewhere in the Bay Area. The police were quickly alerted, and the FBI got involved, and they initiated an intensive search, but they couldn't find Patty. Then on February 6th, a letter arrived at the office of KPFA, a public radio station. This letter came from Patty's kidnappers, and they identified themselves as the Symbionese Liberation Army, aka the SLA. They demanded the release of recently arrested LSA members Joe Ramiro and Russ Little, the publication of the contents of the letter. They threatened the KPFA as being the next victim if they didn't publish this information, and they repeatedly threatened Patty's life while admitting to other murders in the area. In the letter was a credit card to act as proof that they did in fact have Patty in their possession. Okay, now quick detour to discuss the SLA and who they are. The SLA was led, or kind of led, it's a little debated, but it was technically kind of led by a man named Donald DeFreeze, who was an escaped convict with a long rap sheet. An early probation report described DeFreeze as having a schizoid personality with strong schizophrenic potential, and was someone who had a fascination with firearms and explosives. While in prison, he joined the Black Cultural Association, which was an educational group meant to help prisoners return to general society. Berkeley students were recruited to visit the prison as volunteers to BCA, and they helped lead educational and political discussions. Through BCA, DeFreeze met Willie Wolfe, a Berkeley student, and the man who persuaded Russ Little and Robin Steiner, also Berkeley students, to also volunteer through the BCA. DeFreeze eventually set up a separate small group called Unisight, and through all of this, the Symbionese Liberation Army was created. And by the way, Symbionese is not a real word. The aim of the group was to create a link between radicals on the outside and prisoners on the inside through symbiosis. So, Symbionese. The group wanted to close all prisons, end monogamy, and destroy all institutions that made and sustained capitalism. Their motto, which they chanted often, was "Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of people." So there's that. Now back to the story. On February 12th, KPFA received a tape recording featuring Patty's voice. Here's a little bit of it.
Mom, Dad, I'm okay. I had a few scrapes and stuff, but they've washed them up and they're getting okay. And I've caught a cold, but they're giving me pills for it, and so I'm not being starved or beaten or unnecessarily frightened. I've heard some press reports, and so I know that Steve and all the neighbors are okay, that no one was really hurt. And I also know that the SLA members here are very upset about press distortions of what's been happening. They have nothing to do with the August 7th movement, that they have not been shooting down helicopters or shooting down innocent people in the streets. I'm kept blindfolded, usually, so that I can't identify anyone. My hands are often tied, but they're not. And I'm not gagged or anything. I'm comfortable. And I think you can tell that I'm not really terrified or anything.
Now, near the end of the recording, Patty urges her father to listen to Donald's good faith gesture and requests that he provide $70 worth of food to every needy person in California, which would have cost an estimated $400 million. Obviously, Patty's father did not have this money. No matter how wealthy you are, people don't just keep $400 million sitting in a bank, which maybe the SLA would have known this if they knew anything about money, but that's not their MO, is it? Actually, it's like the opposite of their MO. I mean, come on, at least study the people and ideologies you disagree with before you wage war on them. It's just basic. Anyway, in response to this, Patty's dad immediately donated $2 million worth of food to the poor of the Bay Area for 1 year in a project called People in Need. But the need was much greater than they anticipated. The first handout was honestly a complete shit show, which turned into a riot, and people had to just throw food from the back of moving trucks to avoid the chaos and danger. One police officer was stabbed, and a member of the public was knocked unconscious. That being said, later distributions actually worked out very well. It was very helpful. The thing is, the SLA latched onto this initial attempt and viewed it as a half-assed attempt at meeting their demand, and then refused to let Patty go. Instead, they demanded another $6 million food drive to ensure Patty's release. But again, her dad did not have that money just laying around. He offered $2 million now and $2 million at a later date, probably when he could get all that money together, liquidate some assets, move some stuff around. Now, during all of this, more tape recordings were sent to KPFA, and obviously, things were also going down back at the safe house where Patty was held. Now, there are disputes as to what exactly happened, but I'll give you both sides, and you can determine who is more of a trustworthy source. So according to Patty, she was kept locked in a closet for 2 weeks while blindfolded and was spoken to occasionally, while all members of the SLA wore masks to avoid identification. They also assaulted her and repeatedly threatened her life. Now, they started to let her out at times after the 2-week stint in the closet, but she still remained mainly in the closet for a total of 59 days. They read Maoist propaganda to her, forced her to listen to broadcasts, kept her largely blindfolded, she was beat, and she was Specifically, they told her that if she was a person of good faith, and if she was starting to believe them, then she had to sleep with various members of the SLA. Which, that doesn't sound like there's any consent in there, does it? So, now pause for a second, because here I'm going to draw a quick parallel before I continue on with this story. This is back to my previous video in this series. Remember when I talked about Donald Ewan Cameron, the man responsible for some of those brutal medical experiments under MKUltra? How he would deprive his subjects of all senses and force them to listen to statements on repeat for hours at a time? And remember how Gottlieb's biggest goal under MKUltra was to erase someone's personality and fill that void with a pre-programmed personality? It sounds like that's what happened to Patty Hearst. It was very similar to Cameron's experiments, right? It also sounds exactly like what Gottlieb wanted to do, erase a personality and replace it with a new one. I just find the similarity very interesting, so I'd love to hear what you think about that. Anyway, back to regular programming here. Patty had good reason to fear the SLA and take their death threats seriously. Not only did they kidnap her and keep her in a closet, so obviously she's terrified, but they also murdered at least one other person previously. In November of 1973, the SLA had murdered Marcus Foster. Marcus was an American educator, and he had a national reputation for educational excellence. He was also the first black superintendent at a large city school district and was appointed superintendent of the Oakland Unified School District in 1970. The SLA read in the news that Marcus supported a program that required ID cards for all students, which was something the SLA thought was fascist. In their political fury, members of the SLA ambushed Marcus and Robert Blackburn as they left a school board meeting and shot both of the men. Robert survived, but Marcus was shot 8 times with hollow point bullets that had been packed with cyanide, a detail the police had not publicized, and something the SLA specifically noted when taking credit for the assassination. The thing is, Marcus wasn't even fully on board with the student ID program, and he had successfully modified it to meet community concerns. But the specific article the SLA had read had false information on it, and that's what they used when deciding to murder him. Now, interestingly enough, Bill Heiress, who was one of the members of the SLA, and I believe he's actually the man who threw Patty Hearst over his shoulder in the abduction. Now, he has a different memory when it comes to Patty's time in the safe house. He pointed out that Patty came from a very sheltered and privileged background, and that her time in the safe house was the first time she had been exposed to this kind of ideology. According to him, Patty developed a crush on Willie Wolfe. You guys remember him from earlier? He volunteered at the prison with Donald DeFreeze. So Willie grew up wealthy and sheltered as well, so Patty apparently could relate to him, and this aided in her radicalization. The SLA shared with Patty their views on non-monogamy and asked her if there was anyone in the group she wanted to sleep with, and she named Willie, and so they had sex. And this was the first time she saw him without a mask on. At that time, Willie then gave her a monkey pendant, and he kept one, a similar one, a matching one, and wore it. And this detail is very important, so remember it for the future. Okay, over time, Bill alleged that Patty grew fond of the SLA and their ideology, and similarly, they grew fond of her and they didn't want to kill her. So there you go, the two perspectives on what happened at the safe house. And now, bringing the story back to a single perspective. This all led to the 5th recording the SLA sent to KPFA, which occurred 2 months after her abduction. This recording was sent on April 3rd of 1974, and Patty said, "I've been given the choice of 1, being released in a safe area, or 2, joining the forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army and fighting for my freedom and the freedom of all oppressed people. I have chosen to stay and fight. I've been given the name Tanya after a comrade who fought alongside Che in Bolivia." Now, as you'd probably expect, this radical group ran into some capitalistic problems while fighting for their ideology. They became very broke. So they came up with the great idea to rob a bank. This actually fit 2 aims, because not only would they get the capital they needed, but they wanted to publicly announce how committed Patty was to their cause, how they turned a wealthy heiress into a Marxist urban guerrilla. With this in mind, they targeted Hibernia Bank, specifically because they knew it had functioning cameras. They wanted their exploit all over public TV. On April 15th of 1974, they enacted their bank robbery, and Patty was recorded on surveillance video wielding an M1 carbine while her and others robbed the Sunset District branch of Hibernia Bank. Patty, identified under her new name Tanya, yelled, "I'm Tanya, up, 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 against the wall, motherfuckers." Sorry. And we also see DeFreeze here in this very groovy outfit, honestly. He's got a little sun hat, some bell-bottom jeans, very in the times. Anyway, during the robbery, 2 innocent men were shot. They did not die, though, thankfully. And the SLA made away with $10,000, which is around $65,000 nowadays. And 7 days after the robbery, Patty went on to record herself and admitted that she took part in it.
"This is Tanya. On April 15th, my comrades and I expropriated $10,660.02 from the Sunset branch of the Hibernia Bank. Casualties could have been avoided had the persons involved cooperated with the people's forces and kept out of the way until after our departure. I was positioned so that I could hold customers and bank personnel who were on the floor. My gun was loaded, and at no time did any of my comrades intentionally point their guns at me. Careful examination of the photographs, which were published, clearly shows this is true. Our action of April 15th forced the corporate state to help finance the revolution. As for my ex-fiancé, I don't care if I ever see him again. During the last few months, Stephen has shown himself to be a sexist, ageist pig. Not that this was a sudden change from the way he always was. For those people who still believe that I'm brainwashed or dead, I see no reason to further defend my position.
Now, side note on this whole recording, I'm glad she finally realized what a pig Stephen was. But other than that, it seems she is in the thick of brainwashing, some realization about Stephen, but still brainwashed. Or, similar to other members of the SLA, has she just bought into a violent ideology? That's something to think about, and maybe let me know. But let's keep going. So the SLA was on the run, and they hid in Compton, which is in Los Angeles, for a month while authorities searched for them. But authorities eventually caught up when the SLA's improperly parked VW van received a ticket, which linked the car to the street they were hiding out on. And this van was also linked to another crime committed by the SLA and Patty. See, Patty Bill Heiress and his wife Emily Heiress used the van to drive to Mel's sporting goods store in Englewood. Patty waited in the driver's seat while Bill and Emily went in and shopped. Bill grabbed a shotgun shell bandolier to show Emily, but then promptly put down after realizing it was probably a bad idea to buy anything related to guns right now while they were on the run from the feds. The thing is, he set the bandolier down in another area of the store, and while a cashier had witnessed him picking it up, he didn't see Bill put it down. So when Bill went to leave, the cashier stopped him and asked him to search him, and Bill refused, and a huge commotion occurred. Hearing and seeing all of this, Patty grabbed a gun and completely unloaded on the store while Bill and Emily escaped and jumped into the van. And this act is where a lot of people stopped believing that Patty was actually brainwashed, and Bill said it himself. With 4 weapons and keys to the ignition, Patty could have driven off while I was being tackled by store security guards for allegedly shoplifting. Instead, she unexpectedly opened fire to rescue us. This was the spontaneous act of a true comrade that put her in great jeopardy. And on top of all of this, Patty and the Heiress couple hijacked 2 cars and abducted their owners after this. But, on the other hand, Patty has said that her actions in front of Mel's were definitely the result of her brainwashing. She said, "When it happened, I didn't even think. I just did it. And if I had not done it, and if they had been able to get away, they would have killed me." Here's the thing. I can kind of see both sides of this argument. She unloaded on a store to help save members of the SLA. She definitely could have escaped. She could have escaped before he was even tackled. She was just sitting in the van. But also, victims of abuse, manipulation, and brainwashing tactics don't see reality as it is. We have something called Stockholm Syndrome or Battered Woman Syndrome for a reason. And the idea that if they got away and then tracked her and killed her, that's a legitimate fear. Okay, but also it's like at some point we need to hold people accountable for their actions, right? Like where are we going to draw that line? She goes on to help abduct 2 other people, steal cars. She also unloaded a gun on a store. I don't know, but this is a very unique case, so I'll let you guys decide where you land on that spectrum. Anyway, the 3 were now on the run again, like a double on the run. They were double fugitives. You know what I mean. I don't think there's a term for that. But they realized that going back to their safe house in Compton was not a smart move, so they posted up in a motel in Anaheim. Now, at this exact time, the police successfully linked the VW van parking ticket to the safe house street, and 400 police officers and SWAT team members descended on the home, and they knew Patty was likely inside, or they thought she was inside. They cleared people from nearby homes and then announced loudly, "Occupants of 1466 East 54th Street. This is the Los Angeles Police Department speaking. Come out with your hands up." And an old man and a child came out, and the old man said no one else was in the home. But the child snitched and said there were several heavily armed people inside. With this knowledge, the police fired tear gas into the home, and in response, the SLA screamed, "Suck this, pigs," and fired on the police officers. What ensued was a 3-hour gunfight between the police and the SLA, where over 9,000 rounds of bullets were used. The 6 SLA members inside the house died either from gunshots or the fire that broke out and consumed the entire house. Patty, Bill, and Emily all watched this on TV as it was happening, and after, Patty sent another recording to KPFK declaring she was alive, and she was also eulogizing every member of the SLA who died in the gunfight. She also mentions that she finds the brainwashing and duress accusations as amusing. Now, following all of this, Patty and the rest of the SLA were on the run and really hid out all across America. They moved from California all the way to New York City. And Patty was involved in another armed bank robbery as the getaway driver. She planted homemade bombs near a courthouse, and she was involved in planting pipe bombs under LAPD cars. The FBI eventually found Patty on September 18th in 1975, and she was charged with the Hibernia bank robbery as well as explosive and weapons charges. At the time of her arrest, she listed her occupation as an urban guerrilla and was quoted as saying, "Tell everybody that I'm smiling, that I feel free and strong, and I send my greetings and love to all the sisters and brothers out there." She also weighed only 87 pounds, was smoking heavily, and was described as a low-effect zombie who had large chunks of her memory completely missing. And it showed in her IQ, which had dropped from 130 down to 112. After a few weeks in custody and after connecting with various family members, she denounced her allegiance to the SLA. Obviously, though, there is an incentive to do that at that point. Patty and her defense attorney continued to argue she was brainwashed, and Patty herself claimed DeFreeze had been trained in North Korean mind control tactics. She said that both him and Willie Wolfe had raped her, but Emily Heiress gave testimony that Willie and Patty were lovers, and evidence of this was the fact that Patty had the necklace that Willie gave her in her purse when she was arrested, and Willie was wearing his matching version when he was killed in the gunfight in Compton. In addition, on her side, in the defense, her attorney called on multiple brainwashing experts from the 50s to be experts in this trial. One of the more well-known ones was Louis Jolyon West. And if you have been watching the series, you may remember him. He worked under MKUltra and successfully exonerated multiple US servicemen who were under suspicion of treason for making false confessions during the Korean War era. He was a pioneer in research on brainwashing techniques, so he knew his shit. West worked without a fee and conducted extensive interviews, with Hearst producing a 35-page report. He testified that Hearst was not in her right mind when she participated in the bank robbery, and that she displayed the classic signs of coercion, brainwashing, and the Stockholm effect. In Patty's memoir, published in 1982, she described West as having a creepy, hypnotic voice and thought he was too smooth and too soothing to be trusted. She also said West reduced her to crying, murmuring, and mumbling, and she thought he was too interested in the sex that went on within the SLA, particularly the lesbian relationships. That being said, she did credit him with extracting repressed memories, despite it being a very slow and painful process. On November 20th, 1976, Hearst was convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm during the commission of a felony, and she was given the maximum sentence of 35 years pending a reduction at the final sentencing hearing. But the judge on the case died before the final sentencing hearing and was replaced by a judge who gave her 7 years instead. While Patty was in prison, the Jonestown massacre occurred, and multiple affluent people came out and started calling for Patty's exoneration, arguing that if Jim Jones convinced 900 people to take their lives, one person could definitely be brainwashed into doing what Patty did. So on February 1st of 1979, President Jimmy Carter commuted Patty's sentence after 22 months in jail or in prison, and in 2001, President Bill Clinton pardoned Patty Hearst completely. 2 months after her release, she married Bernard Lee Shaw, a policeman who was part of her security detail during her time on bail. She then had 2 kids, became involved in a foundation that helped children with AIDS, and has overall been a very active person in other charities and fundraising activities. She also published a memoir and was featured in some films. So that's the story of Patty Hearst and how brainwashing is deeply involved in her case. We see overlap. I have a water bottle here. I keep hitting it. We see overlap with individuals who were involved in MKUltra and represented POWs accused of betraying the government. We also see how brainwashing isn't just some CIA experiment or some rumor coming out of Maoist China. It's something that can be implemented by unprofessional people like Donald DeFreeze and the SLA on unsuspecting victims. And then it shows up in court and people talk about it. We have experts that testify on it. And arguably, we can see brainwashing occurring all the time in abusive romantic relationships, abusive family relationships, cults, on our phones, and even in our academia. With all that, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on Patty Hearst's case. Do you think she was brainwashed? Or was this all on her own volition? Or was it a combination of the two? And on top of all this, what kind of punishment fits the crime for what she did? It's worth considering all of this. So let me know what you think in the comments. And then, until next time, stay safe and stay curious.